Hello, and welcome to I Am Not For Everyone, the podcast for those looking to release shame, heal from trauma, and feel really, really good being their fully expressed, authentic selves. My name's Dr. Lee, and I am a doctorally prepared nurse practitioner and a certified clinical trauma professional, as well as a mom, wife, and a human being navigating the world with complex PTSD. Season 1 of this podcast came about because I was tired of spending decades living in a shame-filled, trauma-laden body and brain. And after doing a lot of work and learning how to return to a safe, grounded place in my life, I knew it was time for me to take my experience in education and use my voice to unsilence myself, to release the leftover shame, and to give others permission to do the same. On season 2 of this podcast, I'm going to be sharing my experience in education. But even more importantly, I'm going to be bringing on some incredible guests who are going to unsilence themselves. They're going to share their own stories of trauma, shame, and their journeys to healing, resiliency, and self-acceptance. While I believe these episodes will be deeply impactful, I do want to add a disclaimer that we're going to be talking about some potentially triggering topics. So please take the invitation to pause or skip or fast forward on any episode, and to treat yourself gracefully and kindly after each time that you listen. Let's dive in. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode. I am very, very delighted to have Donnie Hill with me here today. Donnie, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. I've been looking forward to this conversation for the past couple of weeks.
Me too. So we met in a podcast group. I was asking people if they wanted to come on and share stories around shame, trauma, resilience. And I just feel like I immediately connected with you. And I was like, I have to have him on here. And I'm so excited to have the listeners listen to your story. But before we do that, can you tell everybody a little bit about you and what you do?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So I tell people I am a somatic leadership coach and business growth strategist. And most of the time I get this blank look like, what does that mean? The way I like to describe it is, if I can keep you healthy and wealthy, then I am on the right track as a business advisor. So I do a lot of work with entrepreneurs and business owners who are high achievers. They're really successful, but they also override their systems a lot. So they end up building their business as they are also going through burnout and exhaustion. And so the somatic piece is really intended to help them reconnect to their body and feel safe in their body and listen to their nervous system and learn how to work with it as they build their business so that they can continue to do it in a more sustainable way.
Yeah, so I'm sure everyone listening right now is like, well, Dolly likes him. It's so good. It's so needed, especially from, I feel like there's a lot of women coaches out there doing this these days, but like having non-women coaches doing this, I think is huge. It's so huge so that there's more representation. I love that. So as we all know, we're here to talk about shame. Such a fun topic, right?
Oh, yeah.
Can you just, I'm going to give the floor over to you. Like, can you just tell us about the story you brought up before the episode, I think is so powerful. So can you share this story with the audience of your experience of shame growing up?
Yeah. So I grew up in Mobile, Alabama. I'm Black, I'm queer, and grew up Catholic and Southern Baptist. So it was like the perfect recipe for all the shame to just like come into my life experience and say, all right, Donnie, here's your PhD in learning how to navigate the world and appreciate the human being that you are. So I think a lot of my shame came around my Blackness because I grew up in predominantly white spaces. And so when I went into Black spaces, I wasn't Black enough. And then when I was in the Black community, there was a lot of shame around my queerness. And then I was too afraid to share with people that I'm gay because of the teasing, the potential beating up, and all of those things. And so my experience with shame has just been tied to like, how do I how do I honor the truth of my identity? And then the other piece of it is also, okay, what are people going to say about my family, and how is this going to impact them? And so now it's like this disappointment of like, am I a disappointment to my family? So you have these kind of three areas that you're moving through. And then of course I'm depressed and incredibly anxious and hypervigilant, and start doing the overachiever striving thing in order to make up for these different areas, to say, okay, maybe I'll be liked because I'm smart, or maybe I'll be liked because I'm a good athlete, or maybe I'll be liked because I'm a talented artist. And so I felt myself trying to stretch into these different areas of my life in order to make up for all the guilt and the shame that I was feeling.
Yeah, that's a lot. Like I know, so profound of a statement. But it is a lot. I think you're talking about intersectionality, which I think is so huge, right? We talked about marginalization and intersectionality a few episodes ago, and just this, it's hard enough when you have one identity that doesn't feel like it fits in, and then when you have multiple that all then intersect and amplify, it's like, whew, it's a lot.
Yeah, I think the piece too was also like not having the representation to see like, oh, people are making it and they're creating lives for themselves. So as a little kid, of course, I wasn't going to watch something that had gay people on television, because then I would be outing myself. And so it's like, well, I'm not watching TV, so I have no clear representation of if this is even a possibility. But then also, there wasn't going to be any way that I was going to go to an LGBTQ center or find resources that supported that community, because that didn't feel safe either. So in a lot of ways, I feel like I've spent so much of my time in isolation that it became the norm. And now I'm in a place where like the isolation doesn't feel good. It's like, okay, what does genuine connection mean or look like? Because I haven't genuinely connected with people for a majority of my life. So it's like I'm having to learn how to build these muscles that either haven't been worked out before, or I haven't worked out in a really long time. And it's kind of clumsy, especially now at 34. I feel like I should have some of my shit together, and like, this feels really awkward. So
well, as
lean into the awkwardness.
Yeah, as a 35-year-old, as someone older than you, I turned 35 yesterday. I'm so joking.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think you're speaking, there's a couple of things I want to pull out of there. The first is you're speaking to something that I think a lot of mid-30 people feel is like, I was supposed to have my shit together by now, right? Whether you're a parent, whether you're working, in a relationship, in any of those areas, it's like the message that I got growing up was like, yeah, by mid-30s, like, what you're doing. And I'm like, and as someone who's like smack dab at mid-30, I'm like, I mean, sometimes, right?
What day is it?
What day is it? Well, and so that's one piece. The other piece, the second piece is that this whole idea of shame is used to isolate, right? It's you're in or you're out. And so there's a lot of people who are in, right? Who are in, but aren't really in. They're pretending to be in, and they've isolated themselves within that group so that they can continue to fit in, kind of, because that feels fundamentally safer than being out. And I'm even thinking of that movie. Oh gosh, the movie, who was in it? I think it was like Kevin Kline. It was called In and Out. And it was about that. It's about a white man though, but he's in that small town where one of his students outs him at the Golden Globes.
Oh yeah.
And it's all about the in and out, right? And how the town sees everything. And whether it's your sexuality, whether it's your gender, your color, your race, your ethnicity, whatever, there's in and there's out, right? And I think today, I think there's a lot more things today that are in than used to be. Like, I know when I was a kid,
Yeah.
I remember watching the Will and Grace episode where Will kissed another man. And I was like, and it wasn't like, that's bad. It was just like, I've never seen that before.
Yeah. It still kind of takes me by surprise sometimes. And that's when I realized, oh yeah, there's still more healing work for me to do. It's like my parents, my cousins, my sisters, they aren't thinking about who they're kissing and like what they're doing or showing any kind of affection. So why should I? And then my buddy and I were talking about this because now when we see teenagers who come out, like there's so much joy in our heart, like, oh my God, you are so liberated and free. And then on the other side of that is like, oh, terrifying, because you're like, holy crap, I couldn't do that at 15, 14 or 15. And it's such a reminder for me of like what the healing and restoration journey looks like, because I think it happens little by little and everybody's at a different phase and stage.
Yeah. I remember when I was younger and like I would see another biracial person that was lighter like I was, and I was like, oh, they exist, right? And nowadays I see there's just kids of all shades and like it's gorgeous. And I'm also I feel that I feel that with you of like oh gosh, it would have been so nice to not know or to not have that outward experience to the level that I did, right? And while you're so grateful for the people coming after you who don't have to have that experience, yeah, there's a definite sting of like, oh, but like that would have been nice. There's something else that I want to go back even further, because we have a lot of white listeners on here. And I think that this is something that they may not realize is just from a sexuality standpoint, particularly in Black religious spaces. You know, I think we talk about bigotry and homophobia and all of these shameful ways of around sexuality in a lot of times in like evangelical white conservative Christian spaces. We don't talk about this in Black Christian spaces. And I remember when I was younger learning the term down low and being like, oh, I was like, but why don't they just like, and you know, Black men who would sleep with other Black men, but be married to a woman. And like, that was how they expressed their sexuality. And I was just like, oh my gosh, that's so interesting to me that is how, that there's so much shame there, right? That everyone knows what's happening, but everyone's pretending to not know what's happening.
Yeah. They don't want to talk about it. And then there's embarrassment when a scandal happens. I'm like, this could have been a conversation. like it didn't. Yeah. Right. It didn't.
This could have been a conversation, not a scandal. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. One of the first episodes that I think I listened to you talk about was either about desire or pleasure. And you were talking about sex for a little bit in that conversation. And I was like, yes. And it wasn't like, ooh, she's going and being edgy. It was more of like, ooh, thank you for normalizing this conversation. Because I think particularly in the Black community, because there's been so much shame around sexuality and the church and that connection. Like, there are probably actually a lot more gay Black men in this world than people know. But rather than us saying, hey, let's have a conversation around sex and fluidity and needs and like desire and what that means, it's, oh, sex can only look this one particular way. And if it doesn't look this way, then there's something wrong with it. Actually, that's really binary. And it also puts a lot of people and our complexity into these boxes that is not binary. And so you're constantly putting shackles and boxes around people, and they're wanting to expand. And so because they don't have any place to expand within these boxes and containers, it ends up coming out sideways. And you're like, oh, it cracked down there. You're like, yeah, but if you just kind of like a cardboard box cutter and just cut that
Yeah.
side and let it breathe a little bit and do a little bit of exploration, you probably wouldn't. Because now there's trust there, there's safety there, there's the honoring of needs there. We can go back and we can have a conversation. I think one of the things you talked about was like, yeah, my husband and I, we have our hotel weekends. I'm like, that sounds so fucking healthy to me.
Yes. Yes. My friends were telling me about this the other day. Some of my single friends, they were like, yeah, when we get into, they were joking. They were like, when we get into our situationships, we're going to have the living alone together thing, and like LAT or something like that. That's not the right abbreviation. I can't remember what they said. I'm not cool anymore. And I was like, they were like, yeah, like where you both have your own places, but then like you take turns sleeping at each other's places, but like you have apartments like next to each other. I was like, oh, that's so great and so cool. And also what an interesting way to like explore being in a relationship with another human where both of your needs get to get met. Right. And I think you're right, is that there's so many boxes around, okay, this is what marriage looks like. Okay, this is what a relationship looks like. This is what parenting looks like. This is what sexuality looks like. And it just gets to the point that like, there's nowhere to move.
Yeah.
There's nowhere to move. There's so many boxes all over the place. You're like, okay, I guess I'm just stuck right here. And it doesn't feel good. And then you're right. You end up doing something somehow that does not work out, that does make things messy. And then a lot of times that leads to even more shame. So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So let me ask you this. Like, I think it sounds like from the beginning, you kind of knew that you were a fish out of water. Like you knew that water was not water you wanted to swim in, right?
Oh, yeah.
How did you decide to move out of that?
Yeah, it was more of like forced out than than if intentional decision. So when part of my coping mechanism was to get distracted in sports and extracurricular activities and to do well in my classes. But during that time, like I was dealing with a lot of depression and anxiety, and it didn't really begin to surface until I got to college. And so I was in and out of the hospital all the time. I kept having stomach issues that doctors couldn't diagnose. I think I was in the emergency room 4 times the first 4 months of my freshman year. And then I ended up getting diagnosed with a neurological voice disorder. So I wasn't able to talk for 5 months. And that was even more isolating. And then it was Thanksgiving, I think it was Thanksgiving break, my junior year of college. I was in my coach's office and I thought I was having a heart attack. And he had to rush me over to the hospital. And so they did the EKG and everything was fine. But the psychiatrist came in. He was the last physician that I saw. And he said, I think you just had a really, really bad panic attack. But I want to ask you some questions. So he proceeded with his protocol and asked me a bunch of questions. The very last question he asked me was, do you want to stay at the hospital? So I checked myself into the psych ward for a week. And I tell people, like, that was the best week of my life. One, I didn't have to do anything. I wasn't responsible for anybody or anything else other than me. And I feel like I got part of my humanity back because I wasn't trying to be something that I wasn't. I was just kind of like, look, Donnie, this is probably as low as it can be without you committing suicide. So I think you should really look at this, because at that point, prior to that, I had contemplated it a number of times. And so this kind of felt like, all right, here's your decision point. You can either do something about it or not. So after the week in the hospital, I was a peer health educator in the dorm. So I went back to the dorm and I was, people were asking where I was and if I was okay. And so I was just really honest with them. You know what? I was having a really rough time and it got to the breaking point and this was it. And then a bunch of students from my dorm just started, either they would come and sit with me or they would come and talk to me. And that's when I realized, oh, this is really a bigger problem than people make it out to be. And I think that that really just allowed me to give myself permission to kind of explore what this journey would look like. And so I think about that as the beginning really of my restoration journey. It was like, okay, I'm saying yes to me. Here's how to do it. So then, of course, in saying yes, like the rest of my life fell apart. So I dropped pre-med. It was like, all right, this is what I've been talking about for the past, I don't know, 16 years. I think I was 4 when I decided I wanted to be a doctor. And now I'm not going to do that. I wasn't doing track anymore, but I was still doing theater. And I remember my high school theater teacher, the day I graduated, she said, I don't care, what you decide to pursue a degree in, but I do think you should really continue to keep theater in your life. It's been really good for you. I said, okay. So I ended up graduating with a degree in theater and worked as an actor for a number of years. And that my career has kind of been all over the place. But one of the big takeaways from me in working as an actor is it really is about understanding people's humanity and understanding the patterns and why we do the things that we do. So then it made me really look at my own patterns. And I realized one of my patterns was I have a lot of anger and rage that has not been like expressed yet. It has nowhere to go. I have no idea what to do with it. And then that's about the time I came into the cancer coaching work and got the tools to really navigate the emotional ups and downs of a cancer diagnosis. Now, I was one of the caregivers for my mom, who's doing really, really well. She just had her 9-year, I think she got 9 years of survivorship last month. So
amazing.
It's been a good thing. Yeah, thank you. So that piece really helped me address the anger. And then I started working with executives and leaders, both in healthcare and in tech. I was like, oh, you all are exhausted. Yeah. Like, I'm exhausted watching you run around and try and manage it all. And this is what you're doing day in, day out. And so that piece was really where the burnout education started to come in place. And then last year is when I started diving into the nervous system education work. And it was something I'd been introduced to 5 or 6 years ago. But I wasn't ready to work with it yet. And last year, after everything, I was like, yeah, my nervous system is shot. I'm burned out. I'm tired of being angry. And I'm ready to just really let this go. And so over the past year and a half, I really just been doing a lot of my own work and then integrating it into my work with leaders. And like, this was the missing piece, because it really allows an individual to navigate the emotional parts of their human experience, but also like it helps them move it out of their body. I know you talk about this a lot in your work, and I don't think people realize it, but we hold so much shame and anger and just like resentment in our cells and in our muscles and fascia and joints. And then people are wondering, like, why does my body hurt? Well, that's why.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think more people are now in a place where they're looking for alternative solutions, because the solutions that we've had in the past have just only gotten us so far.
Yeah.
This is the next level that is going to help us kind of move through our individual stuff and our collective and community stuff. But I also think it's the piece that we need to kind of clear out in order to lay a new foundation for whatever humanity is going to look like next.
Yeah. Okay. There's like 7 things in there that I was like, oh, I should have grabbed a notepad. No, I'm like, I love listening to you and hearing you speak and just having conversations with you, because you just provoke such amazing thoughts. So one of the things I really want to talk about, though, is like this idea of the anger and rage, right? and tying it back to the intersectionality piece, because this is something that, we have this white woman Karen trend happening, which I don't like personally. I'm like, let's not shame an entire name, right, of people. But I say that just to kind of, I know most people listening will know what I'm talking about when I say that. But what's so fascinating to me, and I've had this conversation with a couple of friends that are like, oh, it's just Karen being Karen. And I'm like, okay, but what I need you to understand is that, like, certain people can be Karens and have it be safe, right? And certain people can't, the way things currently are. And so the idea that everyone gets to have this equal expression of anger and rage, and it gets to be safe, and we don't have to store it in our bodies, like we get to have that conversation from an intersectionality and a marginalization standpoint, I think, because that's not safe for everybody.
Yeah.
And I this is actually one of my big pet peeves with the self-help community, is they're like, oh, well, like, just feel your feelings. And it's like, okay, but can we talk about how for most people it doesn't feel safe to feel their feelings? So you can tell them that till you're blue in the face. They're going to like listen to you and be like, yeah, cognitively, I get it. I absolutely agree with you. Also, my body's over here going, hell no.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the work you do is really important, I think, not just from the fact that you help people move through those emotions, not around, not under, not over, through, to process those things out of their bodies. But what you're doing is you're creating a felt sense of safety beforehand. And it sounds like you've been doing that for a really long time, because the fact that you got vulnerable and then had all these people be like, oh, he's a safe space, is huge.
Yeah. It's really funny. I hadn't thought of it in that way, but it's true. Like, most of the time, whether someone knows me for a while or sometimes strangers just meet on the street and they're like, I don't know what it is about you, but you just feel nice to sit next to.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll take it. I'll take it. But I realize now that it's because I've had to cultivate safety for myself. So it's easier for me to like hold that space for other people. But there was a lot of times where I didn't. It's like, what do I do with all this fire and anger and rage? And particularly as a Black man in America, is like, okay, well, I know expressing anger and rage doesn't always end the best for me. So, like, I have to find like practical tools and ways to express it and process it and get it out so that I can come back to language that allows me to say what I need to say or to set boundaries that I need to set. But what's been really interesting is, as I've been just doing the somatic practices, I'm finding that I'm worrying about safety less than just saying what I need to say. And it comes from a very loving and compassionate place, but it's also like, wow, this feels weird that it feels this easy when it wasn't easy for so long. Yeah.
Yeah. I was having a conversation with my therapist the other day around, as you start to do somatic work and like drop back into your body, you start almost having, they're not out of body experiences, but they're like in body experiences where you feel very weird. And I was trying to explain it to my husband last night, and he's like, I am not getting what you are saying. I don't know if I'm going to do any better here. But like, when you spend so much time checked out of your body because feeling things didn't feel safe, and then you start to cultivate that safety for yourself, usually through working with someone else who feels safe, who shows you how to do that. As you start dropping back in and noticing things, like the level of presence I now have in actually being here in the moment, noticing when my brain's like scrolling off and coming back, it's so much higher. And so I feel like I'm here in the moment so much more often, and that feels really weird.
Yeah.
Do you have that?
I do. So every morning I'll go for a walk, and I'll usually walk for like 45 minutes to an hour and a half or something. And part of my practice during that time is to orient just to the environment, because I've been so internally focused. Like now I'm trying to orient to like the external environment, and reprogram, like I'm safe as I move through the world. I'm safe as I walk through my neighborhood. I'm safe as I go down the street, etc. And it, in some moments, it feels really like easy and peaceful, and I have that moment of, wow, I'm really present and I don't want to do anything else and I'm nowhere else. And then there are moments where I'm like, holy crap, I'm ready to jump out of my skin. I'm ready to jump out of my skin. And I think that is definitely a normal part of the process when you haven't been connected to your body for so long. But it is really hard to explain to someone, one, if they haven't been disconnected from their body and they already have a higher level of safety than you do. But two, I think if people just aren't, they aren't necessarily thinking about it. And so I think, I'm not sure if you identify this way, but I would consider myself a highly sensitive person.
Yes, absolutely.
So I'm attuning to other people and the environments a lot more than I think some of the people around me.
Yeah,
because of my upbringing, and so for them, it doesn't feel like a thing. They're like, yeah, I'm just moving through the world and I'm enjoying the world. What's the problem?
I want to just for a day, like be that person to just experience again what that feels like, to be like, oh yeah, no, I'm not worried about things. But I have to say too, though, the more I've started doing this work, and I'm curious if you found this as well, is like, I haven't met a person who's like fully in their body. Like that I've worked with. There are, I think, maybe a handful of people on this planet who have gotten to the point that they're there, right? The vast majority of people have had something happen, something happened in those first 12, 18 years of life where that created a rupture, that created a sense of unsafety, just even in one place, where if they're over in that world and they sense that threat, like they're out, they are not in their body. Or they are so internally focused on their body that they're like in certain parts of their body that they're missing cues from the rest of their body or the outside world, which is what used to happen to me. So yeah, I think it's like, we talk about it's a spectrum, like nothing is binary. There's a spectrum, like being fully present in your body versus being fully like up in your head, completely checked out. I think most people fall in the middle of that. And then there's the highly sensitive people who are like, I feel like I bounce between the two. I have to like I'll be in my head for a minute and then I'm like, oh wait, like, hold on, come back down. Let's feel our feet on the floor.
Yeah.
Feel our butt in the seat.
Yeah. I definitely feel that way.
Yeah. So the other thing I just wanted to pull out from what you said that we touched on a little bit is just the vulnerability piece. Because I think that this is where a lot of people have the wrong, as a society, given people the wrong message, which is that vulnerability is weakness. Like you saying, yeah, I went through this. Like I just went through this. This was hard. That's weakness. Yeah. And that's actual strength, because it's allowing people to have a felt sense of connection with you, to be like, oh, he's going to tell me what's really going on. He's going to communicate with me. He's going to let me feel him. So it's safe for me to let him feel me.
Yeah. Vulnerability is one of those words. It used to drive me crazy because it's like, oh, be more vulnerable. And then people would like use strategic vulnerability in order to.
Oh, I love this strategic vulnerability. I'm going to share this thing that's like not actually vulnerable, but make it look vulnerable, and then you're going to love me, right? Or you're going to like. CEOs do this all the time. We teach CEOs how to be strategically vulnerable, which is not real vulnerability.
Yeah, I'm having flashbacks to all meetings, but I think when people, like you said, when people do it, you feel it. It's not just kind of this like, oh, that sounded so good. It was like, no, I felt that in every ounce of my being, and it felt good. Whatever that is, I want some more of that. And I think, especially in my experience, I think I struggled with vulnerability for a long time because the messaging for me growing up was like, no pain, no gain. Don't show your weakness. Don't let them know something's bothering you. Man up. All of
man
this stuff.
up. Yeah. Don't cry, or I'll give you something to cry about.
Yes. And I think that ends up doing such a disservice. Have emotionally fluid human beings and like grounded human beings, because now you have all of this pain, and now you have nowhere to express the pain. Now you have shame because you have pain and you don't think anybody else has it, and something's wrong with you. And it just ends up, like you said, perpetuating the cycle. Whereas I think when we do tap into vulnerability and true vulnerability, one, there's a releasing for us, but two, there's a releasing for the other person. And you're like, oh my God, thank you. You finally said it. Yeah. I went to my first men's circle probably in March of this year. And I had never been to one before. I didn't know what it was. And it was virtual, obviously. But it was also, I was one of two queer men in a group of 40. And I'm listening to these men like just share their experiences. I'm like, this is sexy as hell. I think if more women knew men were doing men's circles, like there would be some good husband material there.
Yes. I totally agree with you. I actually, it's one of those places where there are several like very emotionally connected, available men in my life. And I'm like, it is so attractive. And I don't mean that, even sexually, just relationally, It is like, oh my gosh, the fact that you are willing to like feel your feelings in a world that has really taught you that is not how you are supposed to show up. And one of my friends is actually, he's a gay male, but he talked to me about this. He's like, I really have much more masculine qualities. He's like, and what I've noticed is that there's a lot of stereotype for me to be more effeminate but if I express myself in a more quote unquote societally acceptable feminine way, that's when I'm allowed to express my emotions. I'm allowed to be very emotional in that way, but I don't actually that's not how I feel comfortable. He's like, so it's this very weird dynamic of, and also just the fact that we have decided that feelings are feminine, right? I really like looking at life through the lens of energies. And I hate that we've labeled them feminine and masculine because it's so confusing to people. But like what you're talking about here with vulnerability, a lot of people would see that as a more feminine trait. And in my opinion, I think that it's not at all. And in fact, when I see very masculine men do that, I'm like, oh my gosh, like so attractive. So good.
I think I at least find this for myself is it's attractive to me because it reminds me to continue to give myself permission to do it. Like it makes that person magnetic. And I think we miss out on so much. We have to kind of barricade ourselves into these roles.
Yeah, it's the boxes. It's the boxes again.
Yeah.
But we found like this
expectations.
We found this new age personal development spiritual way to like put boxes around people yet again. And it's like, okay, this is what we were actually trying to get away from, right? I think you're right though. And I will say I have a lot more men coming my way now from a shame, trauma, psychological safety perspective. I have a lot more men like tiptoeing into the circle being like, what's this about? This is interesting, right? A lot of men have joined the free Becoming Trauma Informed group that I run because their partners are in there and their partner is like, oh my, you need this, right?
Yeah.
And they pull them in the group and then the men actually start participating more than the women who brought them in. And it's been a really cool thing to see, because like, this isn't, I don't care how you identify from a gender sex perspective. Like this is a human thing. It's a human thing of being able to feel your feelings and process them and like learn the meaning. Right. I always say like guilt has a meaning behind it. Like frustration has a meaning behind it. Anger has a meaning behind it. Like, so instead of shoving it down, figure out why, like feel it and figure out what is causing you to feel that way. And then there's power in that.
Yeah. I think one of the things that came to mind as you were talking about more men are finding their way into your container is like, it's something we all want and need, but like haven't known how to tap into. So if I think about my mentors just over the past 3 or 4 years, 90% of them are female.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't realize that until recently when I was thinking about it. I was like, what is this really about? But I realized that they have kind of the structure and the discipline, and that piece I can have a conversation with them about and move through. But the other side of that is there is no judgment around me processing and having to move through the emotional aspect. And so they hold that space for me as I find my footing in it. And then I find that, they're actually allowing me to find my balance, find that specific balance point for me. And so when I hear that men are coming into your container, I'm like, they're moving towards their balance. And so it's really exciting. And I'm glad more coming into your world.
Yeah. Well, and I one of the first things we said when we talked is I was like, I'm so glad that I now know a male coach who does this that I can refer people to, because I get men or non-binary humans who are like, I want to work with a man. And I'm like, okay, great. I don't have one to send you to. So let me work on that. And the way that you do it, the way that you express yourself and the way that like you just are sharing your work with the world is so beautiful. And I'm so appreciative of it. And so, yeah, like just the fact that more male leaders are doing this, more non-binary humans, like just humans in general that are not women are doing this is so good. We actually have our first 2 men in our teacher training, and I like could not be more excited. And also I'm over here as a leader going like, okay, I've only coached women, like not only coached women, but like I've only taught this to women before. So this is going to be a fun experience for me to just like see where the difference is. And I'm guessing there's actually going to be a lot more similarities than, it's just, again, society telling me that it's going to be different one way than the other, and seeing like, no, everyone just gets to get treated as a human. So.
Yeah. What might be interesting, is that they'll still cover the same spectrum, but they might start in different points
Yes.
on the
Yes.
spectrum.
Yes.
So you just get to bring them in a different direction, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, exactly. So let me ask you this. What does your life feel like now compared to before? I mean, you talked about a lot of distress, right? A lot of just rupture and what's the word I'm looking for? Like difficulty beforehand, like both in your internal experience and your external experience. So what does it look like now?
Yeah, my life is a lot more fluid now. And for me, fluid just means there's a lot more ease. So um, I think there's a lot more congruence internally and externally, which makes life easier. Whereas before there was a lot of like tension and strain and frustration and fear. And so because I'm not carrying all of that around with me, I enjoy moving through the world. It's like,
Ooh.
wow, there's a lot of really good stuff out here. And I feel almost like a little kid who's just kind of relearning how to interact with my environment. And so there's a lot of like curiosity and wonder and pleasure and joy and excitement and playfulness. And so I feel like all of those things that I kind of pushed aside or lost touch with are now coming back online.
Mm. That's actually really poignant because one of the things that I tell my clients when they come to me and they're like, I can't relax, I can't play, I can't, like, I have trouble playing with my kids, I have trouble like imagining. You can't, it's very hard to cultivate a space of curiosity and play without safety. If you feel like you are threatened, if your body, if your past painful learning is like teaching you that the world you are in right now is scary, it's like when the bear is chasing you, you don't stop and you're like, oh, I wonder what that flower, like what kind of flower that is. Oh, is that purple or is that violet? You're like, nope, just running, right? Bye.
Yeah.
So the fact that you're dropping back into your body saying, hey, just because this felt unsafe before doesn't mean we're unsafe now. And like you're doing the work to move the things that have been stuck or stagnant through, it opens you up for curiosity and for play. And it's a lot easier to just lay on the floor and like have fun with your kid or like go to the beach and go boogie boarding or when you've never tried it before or do these things when your body's not like, but what if we die?
Uh-huh. I love that you brought that up. And this was one of those experiences for me where it doesn't sound like much, but when I think about where I was versus where I am,
Mm-hmm.
I got to see a lot of healing. So when I think I was 5 or 6, I was at one of my dad's friends' birthday parties, and they had a pool, and it was like a 6-foot pool. And at that time, I didn't know how to swim, and my dad's friend threw me into the pool, and so I just remember like gasping for air and having a panic attack and having all of my emotions come out on the car ride home. And probably most of my childhood, I hated swimming. I didn't want to go on rope swings. I didn't want to do any of that. And if I would go in, it would just I would either swim on the side or like have something around me. And so back in, I think, July of August this year, we went camping and there was a rope swing. My partner was like, let's go jump on it. And I can feel myself like, oh God, I don't really want to do this. So he's from the Azores and loves the water and is just kind of like, yeah, go and do it. And I'm getting up there and I'm grabbing it. Like, I can't believe I'm doing this. So I'm up and I'm standing, waiting to like go in. And when I go, like, I can feel my body just relax and like this joy come over me. And then I let go and I swim back to the rock and step out. And in that moment, I realized I've spent probably 25 plus years avoiding doing that because of all this fear and kind of angst and that experience. And now to do it and to do it joyfully and to want to do it again, I'm like, this feels like fun to me. It feels like I'm actually stepping into my life and wanting to enjoy my life. At one point I thought, maybe I would go jump off a rock into a body of water somewhere now. Whereas before, that would be the last thing on my mind. I'm like, no, that's the ocean. I can't see the bottom. There's some animals swimming around in there somewhere, and I might hit a rock. Those odds just don't sound like they're in my favor.
Yeah, I love that. Oh, that's so good. I won't tell it, but I had a similar experience with water slides this summer with my kids, where you're like, oh no, but like, I don't have to be afraid. Like, there are so few actual threats. There's lots of potential threats, but there's so few actual threats out there that I need to be immediately worried about. Oh, so good. Okay, so with every episode, we end with this question. What's one piece of advice you would like to give our listeners who maybe feel like they're closer to your past than they are to your present?
I would say the shame mindset work is important. The emotional work is important. But I think paying attention to how shame shows up in your body is probably the key piece that has made a real difference for me. Like, I didn't realize how kind of constricted and hunched over I was, even in my body language. It just kind of felt like my norm until I had a coach reflect it back to me. It was like, your body position change. You're a lot more open and a lot more fluid and relaxed. And I realized part of it has been because I've been working with my nervous system and my body to actually move the shame out of it and to come back into ease. And I think when people work with the mindset work and do the body work, then there's something that's a lot more restorative about it.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think most people start with mindset because the body piece is like, it's a newer piece. It's a little more, it's so funny. I say this, like, it's a little more out there, but it's not. We've been studying this for like 250 years. We just keep burying it. That's an episode for a whole nother day. But, that body work, you're right. Absolutely. Integrating that in is so huge. And if people want to learn how to do that, they can come find you. We're going to make sure that we have your info in the show notes.
Awesome.
And just thank you so much for joining me. I feel like I could talk to you for another hour. We won't do that. But thank you for joining me.
I've loved our conversations, both the very first one and this one, and I'm looking forward to some more.
Yeah, y'all, I'm figuring out a way. We're gonna do something together. I don't know what it is yet, but I'm gunning for it. So we're gonna figure it out. All right, thanks everyone for listening, and we will. Yes, it's all in the works. We will see you next week. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you're interested in learning more about how you can help yourself and others release shame, heal from trauma, and create healthier, safer, more mutually beneficial relationships, I want to invite you to head to our website, institutefortrauma.com. At institutefortrauma.com, you'll find free resources, be able to connect to our free online community, and view our courses and trainings, including our foundational trauma-informed, psychologically safe certification, aka the TRIP certification. Head to institutefortrauma.com today to learn more.